Welcome back to the Docket Index. Today's episode is different. We're not just talking about litigation trends or mass tort mechanics. We're talking about integrity, credibility, and what it truly means to represent survivors of sexual abuse. I'm joined today by Symone Shinton, the founder of the law office of Symone Shinton, PLLC, a firm built around the powerful premise, the law firm where survivors speak and are heard. Symone, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Your website doesn't read like a typical law firm. It says the nation's choice for ethically empowering survivors of sexual abuse through transparent representation rooted in integrity. That's not standard legal marketing language. Why is it important for you to position your firm that way?
Yeah, so my firm is founded on my fundamental belief that sexual abuse is a different injury than the entire personal injury industry, and that the business model that might work excellent for a car accident or even a catastrophic injury or medical malpractice just doesn't work with sexual abuse. And part of that is that survivors of sexual abuse are not a monolith, right? There are some fair stereotypes that you can apply to like how someone deals with a brain injury, how someone deals with a spine injury, what the kind of communication that you need to have with somebody who is going on medical leave from work for a surgery that they need to get, right?
Sure.
But survivors of sexual abuse, how they process trauma is as unique as their personalities and as unique as the abuse happens itself, right? And so I wanted the ability to focus my practice to have complete control over the clients that I take. And really, that's been more of an expansive decision of there are clients that the industry, can't profit enough off of. And so they turn them away. More single incident cases or less severe abuse where, sometimes the corporate liability is actually more severe, even if the abuse is not as severe as a full-fledged penetration sexual assault. There could be a massive cover-up of a repeat offender who is doing it to,
Sure.
and I just happen to have the one victim that's come to me. So I saw a lane of how I could serve women that are getting turned away from the bigger firms. And it's definitely been a journey. We're 6 months in now, but I feel correct that the lane I thought existed. And so now it's just continuing to grow and stay loyal to the principles we founded the firm on.
That's so powerful. And, it sounds like you've really found a lot of alignment there, which is really great. You refer to yourself as the survivor's lawyer. That's a bold identity. What does that mean to you?
It means that it's a public commitment to my clients that I will meet them where they are, right? Sometimes what that looks like is having to involve a medical provider who can give an opinion of whether the individual is at a mental state where they can survive litigation, right? Litigation can be an incredibly traumatizing and triggering experience. And it's been humbling for me to have to not play armchair psychologist as much as I would like to, right? I know what I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. I know what my own personal healing journey looked like. But again, like my experience is not necessarily what the woman next to me's will be. So, having to create as many systems and processes as I can to help me assess what's in the survivor's best interest legally. And, on the flip side of that, sometimes someone's not ready to go to therapy and I have to respect that. And that might mean that depending on what their statute of limitation is, we continue to, work with the client to get them the treatment that we think that they need, that maybe that doesn't look like therapy. Maybe that looks like getting them into a better, career, getting them out of a relationship that's not serving them. It's so much like not lawyering that to me is part of my job, because often we are the first people who survivors are disclosing to, and that's just the reality. So, my options are to say, well, when you become a better case, come back to me or don't, or I can, view my role more expansively, recognizing you may heal in a way where you don't ever want to seek litigation. But, there's such a gap in the industry of lawyers being willing to even have a conversation with someone if they don't see dollar signs on the other side of the case, of the initial intake. So, I'm confident I'll know a lot more in 5 years about what does and doesn't work. But right now, I feel just having my door open to have conversations with women of, what does justice even look like for you? A lot of women don't want to, they don't want their abuser to go through the criminal process. They don't want to go through it. And that's totally valid, but that's very counter industry right now.
Sure.
So just continuing to be flexible as much as I can.
Yeah. And that leads right into my next question, which is when someone lands on your intake page, the very first thing they see is welcome to our community. What are you comfortable sharing with us about your story? And to your point, that's radically different from most intake forms. Tell me a little bit more about why you start there.
Yeah. So I was really lucky to transition from the defense world where I started into the personal injury world at a startup sport firm. And I was able to see firsthand, where the my line in the sand was of, oh, these systems work for general personal injury cases, but they're actually ostracizing to the sometimes what could be our best client, right? Someone with really severe abuse who is potentially disclosing to us for the first time is a very sensitive person. And what I learned very quickly from working with my clients at my last firm was that overwhelmingly the first, and this is completely supported by the psychological data, overwhelmingly the first time that you speak to someone, they are not going to disclose everything that's happened to them. And, especially with men who are abused as boys, that is a whole journey of building trust with them for them to actually explain how severe what happened to them is. And so you might get an intake form where someone describes fondling, right? But in month 3 of me meaningfully being a reliable support system, they disclosed that a rape occurred. And so for me, I've tried to build the language in my intake system around acknowledging that I'm a complete stranger to you. I am not your savior. I have not earned the right to know anything about you. It's a privilege that you're even remotely considering sharing it, right? And I've tried to kind of normalize that I don't expect them to tell me everything, and that's something I'm going to earn. Now, of course, what that translates to is more work and more time, right? But I have the privilege in running my own shop to, if I'm going to partner with someone, it's an informed decision, right? Like I built this place so I can use my time how I see fit, and I'm going to make the time to build that relationship. But where you're at a mass sport firm that's potentially, thousands and thousands and thousands of clients and different campaigns, it's very difficult to build that into the work stream.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And, it really seems like you've set up the opportunity to make a real impact. And let's talk more about your career. It's very layered. You started in big law and then plaintiff mass tort work, and now you've built a firm entirely focused on sexual abuse survivors. Walk us through those transitions and what did each stage teach you?
Yeah. So I'm a first generation college grad, law student, American. When I was in law school, the most important thing was being able to graduate with a job where I could support my family. And that's not to insult the defense world at all. I had such incredible mentors at both firms that I was at. I was taking depositions the first year that I was at Greenberg Charg. I got second chair trial experience. It was unbelievable the kinds of things that I was given the opportunity to do at Greenberg Charg that, I think it has a reputation for associates getting good experience there. And that was absolutely my experience. And then I went to the kind of firm that just truly doesn't exist. There's, Goldman Ismail, and it's what I would say it's the only other counterpart would be Bartlett Beck, of just a true trial firm where you are in the trenches of doing really, really complicated, scientific, novel work. And again, I was really, really lucky to be surrounded by just truly ethical lawyers who, viewed their role as a defense attorney as not to just do what the client says, but to do what's in their best interest. And, the kinds of lawyers who weren't afraid to take the unpopular positions because they knew it was what was best, and who meaningfully gave me opportunities to lead in my career. Like we had a motto and largely driven by the fact that we didn't bill by the hour. We had alternative fee agreements, and I could write a book about how much that changed my life. I became the lawyer that I am today in that alternative fee agreement environment, where if you thought you had a good idea, you could just run it down, right? But I was surrounded by the mantra that we had there is like, if you're in a room, you have to contribute something to it. So the idea of the associate as a note taker, the idea of an associate as like, take direction and don't speak up was just really not the culture there. You were expected to meaningfully contribute. So, a lot of people, I say that to say a lot of people on the plaintiff side, assume that like this was always my plan and I was getting this, insider look at the business world because I always planned on suing it. And it wasn't the case at all. I felt like I had such a positive experience of seeing how companies took seriously and treated plaintiffs with respect that I had a very surprising experience on the plaintiff side when I started encountering so many defense firms that don't, right?
Yeah.
And realizing, like my colleagues across the V on the plaintiff side, I would get I prided myself on the fact that I would have good relationships. I've always had great relationships with my opposing counsel. But I would always be like, plaintiff attorneys are so defensive when I meet them. They think that I'm going to, make their client cry when I'm going to be the first one to pause the deposition, right? And now that I'm on the plaintiff side, I understand why they are the way they are, because I've had to protect so many of my clients from defense attorneys that, you're not doing your job well by beating up a survivor of sexual abuse. There's no reason why you have to that way, but those attorneys exist that way. So I got to serve over 1,000 survivors of sexual abuse in my first year and a half on the plaintiff side. It was the most transformative, fulfilling, purpose-driven work that I've done. I co-led the firm's litigation involving a OBGYN who was sexually abusing women for literally decades, transformed hundreds of women's lives just to have someone stand up for them, right? And I can't emphasize enough that sexual abuse survivors are not motivated by money. They just want to make sure that it's done to someone else. So we did incredible work together. And, on the other side of it, I saw the open lane for me to serve my community in a way that I didn't think I would be able to serve if I was completely devoted to being a partner at a mass tort firm. And I do still do mass tort work for sure. But, the thing that gets me up in the morning are my single incident cases where I know if they were at a mass tort firm, they would not be spoken to on a regular, they'd be spoken to through deposition. And, where I can meaningfully improve their ability to heal. And also, from a legal perspective, I see value where other people overlook it because I'm getting to know the client in a way that you can't fake it. Either you're putting the time in or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so inspiring that you've been able to stand up for so many women, but also that you've found your calling in this and that, it is your life's work. And, I can hear the passion. And that's really inspiring.
Thanks. I mean, I guess to that point, I would say too, right? Like I am constantly I'm very, very big on mentoring younger women in this profession in all of its different, auspices, whether it's other lawyers, paralegals, staff members. And a big thing that I always say is like, everything doesn't need to be everything all at once, right? So like when I was, defending a pharmaceutical company at Greenberg Traurig, never in a million thousand years did I think I would be doing what I'm doing right now. And so it's like just trusting that you're learning the skills that you're learning for a reason.
Right.
And also, look, my defense community refers me cases, right? I would have never in a million years have thought that the relationships that I built with, in-house and outside counsel would ever be the people who say, hey, this happened to a friend. Is there something you can do, right?
Yeah.
But you never know the trajectory of your career.
Totally. And I think that speaks to not only what you've accomplished professionally, but who you are as a person. And that you're really, I mean, you started this podcast with, this is your public commitment. And it's beyond just your public commitment, but also your personal one. And I think for people, across the courtroom to be sending you cases as well is like, it's incredibly powerful.
I hope for everyone that everyone finds the thing that really actually fuels them, especially in law, because this is such hard work. But truly, I mean, like, the business model is built around the notion that there will be some cases that are particularly valuable because for whatever reason, they're in the Goldilocks zone of liability, right?
Sure.
There could be someone who is fondled, but because they were fondled by a security guard at a hospital and that security guard had been complained of before, tremendously valuable case. And then someone who that security guard takes behind the hospital and does something to because and it was the first time he'd done it, much more difficult case, right? So, like, there's fundamental inequities in the value of these cases.
Yeah.
And so, from our perspective, we build the financial reliability of the business model of precisely because there will be some cases that, due to the current inequities in the law, are disproportionately more valuable than some of the most traumatizing cases. We can afford to take those cases, potentially waive our fee just to make sure that this person gets something, especially against like individuals who are the most difficult cases that generally speaking, suing an individual, I'm doing it for the client's, well-being and to feel a sense of accountability because individuals, their assets. But, there's enough spoils from a mass tort sex abuse campaign that I can afford to potentially not get paid for my costs on doing something that will actually radically change the trajectory of someone's healing journey.
Yeah, I love that. And how do you help clients determine whether filing a lawsuit is even the right choice? Because as you mentioned, a lot of your work is very expansive and not every survivor needs or wants litigation.
Yeah, this is, I think, the most difficult and important part of my job, and not just the decision to file a lawsuit, but like every step of the way, right? Because I have had success settling lawsuits right after we file a motion to dismiss. I've had success settling them after written discovery is completed. Other times you have to survive summary judgment, prepare for trial, right? The appetite of the defense counsel to mediate things and even mediate pre-suit is just completely variable on the kind of case. But this is where, it's when I say like rooted in transparency, what I mean is I am telling the survivor the anatomy of a lawsuit. And what that means, not just from hey, so you're going to have a deposition that you'll have to call off work that day and we'll need to prep the day before. No. So, hey, every person who you've ever spoken to about this assault, they're going to get deposed, very likely. And so, your ex-boyfriend knows about the assault and you guys haven't spoken in 2 years, he's going to get deposed. How do you feel about your ex, having to potentially uproot that relationship and put that in front of the tribunal? So they're very real questions. Or, hey, you're telling me that you're not ready to go to a therapist, and I respect that. If we put this in litigation, that's something you are going to hear from the opposing side that if you were really traumatized, you would be getting treatment. And if we don't get you treatment, at a certain point, I have to think as a lawyer, how is that going to impact the value of your case, and have that candid conversation. So it's really just making the time to be as honest as possible. And I've seen, to me, the industry standard is you fill the client up with encouragement of like, this is the right thing, right? And then when those big traumatizing moments come, the clients overwhelmingly feel whiplash. They feel shock that they have to do what they have to do. Even things like producing the therapy records, right? Like, if you file certain kinds of claims, those are going to be put before opposing counsel, right?
Right.
So like just and sometimes I think it's because I'm a first gen lawyer that I understand what regular people don't assume about the litigation process. But really, it's there are a lot of lawyers, because a case is valuable, they're going to push it as far as they can, and they're going to tell the client what they think that they need to tell them to keep them going, because the value of a suit where the client's given a deposition is more valuable than pre-suit. right?
Right.
But I'm always just conscious of how is the client going to experience this 10 years from now? And like, yes, money helps. Money helps people get therapy. Money helps people heal 100%. But if I don't have a client by the time trial happens because they've had a major psychiatric breakdown, or it ostracized them from their support system because their support system feels betrayed, they've been put into a litigation that they had no idea about, I have failed as a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, all of that is really meaningful and speaks to you're with them throughout much of their healing journey. It's not just about sort of dropping into this small segment of their experience and, getting the money or getting them accountability and then leaving. And I think that that's really powerful because again, of course, in all personal injury, someone has gone through something devastating, but this is a particularly sensitive area, and it's just so clear that you approach it with that sensitivity in mind. And I know that you've, even expanded your work beyond just being an attorney, where you've built Survivor Speak, which isn't even really about litigation specifically. Tell us about that and what role that plays.
Yeah. So the Survivor Speak project is born out of my tremendous pain for the clients who come to me and I can't do anything for them legally. That's where the idea came from. And I'm not, saying that me not being able to take their case necessarily means that they don't have, for one reason or another, they're not with, I don't have the ability to do something for them. And knowing that the overwhelming majority of clients, the main reason that they're coming to me is because it means something to them for a lawyer to say, hey, something illegal happened to you, right? And I would say the majority of survivors who come to me have not have either been too afraid to go to the police or have had a negative experience with the police. So, I can't sleep at night just sending an email of like, sorry, I can't do anything for you. So, I started reaching back out to survivors and saying like, look, the litigation platform I think will be net negative for you. I could say I'm going to file a lawsuit for you, but I think, or, especially where there's not an institutional defendant, right? It's suing an individual who we have no reason to believe has the assets to compensate them. And it's like, instead, what do you want people to understand about what you experienced? And like, how can we talk about assault in a way that is improving the visibility of survivors, enhancing the conversation that we're having? Because my God, I'm sure you've to go. I mean, obviously, in the wake of the Epstein files right now, like I sometimes I'm like, what more do I need to say about the state of the law and the state of treatment of survivors of sexual abuse?
Yeah.
But even the conversations that you see being had on social media are just like, oh my God, like we have not progressed at all about the kinds of misunderstandings that we have about what a real survivor looks like, what a real assault looks like. So, it was let me create this platform that ultimately it will live on YouTube. We're gonna have a YouTube channel that is just, right now it's in a limited components on my Instagram, but we're working on building a YouTube channel where, when I sign a client, there are lots of repeat conversations, things that I notice I have the conversation with every single one of my clients. Now you don't just have to take it from me. You can listen to all of these other women and just have this space where, I'm only one person. When I'm the busiest on a case, I'm the least emotionally available to carry my clients through the other things that they're experiencing. So it's kind of scaling my emotional availability by creating a platform where women can feel heard, whether they're my clients or whether they're just survivors who, like this. To me, that I don't feel that this content exists where survivors can really just talk about what the experience was like. And candidly, I think that, a part of my purpose is to show survivors like, hey, what you were experiencing, I was there. I was there too. You can be me. You can heal and create this life where you don't even think about what happened to you. And so this is kind of, the canvas where I get to show that in a way I otherwise wouldn't have time. But I'm really excited to see what it will look like a year from now.
Yeah.
time-consuming thing in the meantime.
I can imagine, but well worth the time spent. I mean, and to be that beacon of light for people to, whether that's to share their story, whether that's to get closer proximity to someone who has survived it and see firsthand, this is how you move on with your life or move forward. I think there's so many different factors that could be impactful for somebody. Let's zoom out a little bit too. So recently we've seen reports about California involving fraudulent claims and sexual abuse litigation. You've been vocal that this isn't just about marketing abuse or lost ad spend. Why is this so dangerous?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to get really specific here. Obviously, what's happened in California has received recent media coverage and very likely will continue to. But this is, to me, the future of the mass tort industry is more and more defendants, whether they're public entity defendants like they are in California or private entity defendants, pushing and pushing and pushing and saying, a plaintiff fact sheet isn't enough. We get to depose every one of your clients. We get to interview everyone. Your clients have to have proof of medical treatment. And the reason why on the plaintiff side, we are defensive about what otherwise is a somewhat of a standard process if it's a single incident case, right? At least the reason why I'm defensive about it is that overwhelmingly these mass tort cases, at least right now, are getting the kinds of victims like child male survivors of the kind of institutional abuse where the person who was in control of your ability to eat and live and be safe was inflicting it on you, right? Like this is very, very, very severe abuse. They're very, very sensitive issues where, every single time I send an email, a text, or a call, it's legitimately traumatizing to this person who is, a remarkable miracle to me in that they have been able to build a life in any capacity, right? Like child sexual abuse is, all abuse is horrible. Child sexual abuse from a genetic development standpoint, we know has, that has it changes the trajectory of someone's life. And the layers in which these mass tort campaigns are empowering these survivors and through a balance of being able to get an appropriate amount of justice for you without subjecting you to sitting in a room with a lawyer who is going to cross-examine you in what I have personally experienced, not California, but personally experienced the kinds of lawyers who say, so tell me what happened. Tell me what happened again. No, tell me what happened a third time. Like they're trying to trigger, and it's not a legal conversation. It's intentionally trying to humiliate someone into having a psychiatric break so that, a jury doesn't like them, right? So that is my long-winded way of saying, we do our best to protect our clients from being re-traumatized as much as possible. Now, on the defense side, I certainly understand why they want as much information about clients as possible. That's their job, right? But when you have situations like advertising firms paying individuals to openly commit fraud, right? Like this is not it's an untasteful advertisement that, a firm isn't proud of. It's fraud in the most blatant sense possible. They're harming our real survivors because that's going to increase the scrutiny of their claims. And of course, harming survivors nationwide by the notion, look, when there's a fraudulent, even an allegation of a fraudulent survivor, it's everywhere in the news, right? It's covered. Because who benefits from that? The defendants who otherwise have to compensate survivors benefit from that, right? And we know statistically that sexual abuse is one of the most underreported crimes, and that false accusations of sexual abuse at worst track false accusations of any crime, right? There's not a false sexual abuse accusation anomaly or issue, but it's to the harm of everyone when we're feeding a narrative that disempowers our clients everywhere and subjects survivors to more and more of a investigative process than what otherwise would be expected for them to prove that they were harmed.
Yeah. I mean, that makes complete sense and is quite frankly disturbing that people are being forced to go through this. And, I think again, just your passion for the advocacy of your clients and for survivors nationwide comes through there, because it is in these nuances of the process that, you can make a big impact. And, you've said that your concern isn't primarily financial, it's credibility. Walk us through how fraudulent claims affect real survivors in settlement negotiations.
Yeah, so I would say the worst case scenario is when and I'm using the term fraudulent probably not fairly, and that the defense experiences any claim that's dropped as fraudulent, right? Like that's the argument that they'll make. If you have a filed case or if you have a claim in your inventory that ultimately you drop, they will claim that it was fraudulent, right? When there might be a million reasons why a case needed to be dropped or a claim needed to be removed from a portfolio, many of which can include they were too traumatized by going through the litigation
Right.
process, right? So like recognizing that perception already exists. Having if you have a portfolio of hundreds or thousands of cases and there is one client, for example, I'm creating a hypothetical situation where the defense are able to prove definitively like they were never a patient, they were never a detainee of this facility, right? That will be brought up every single moment of mediation, every single moment of litigation. We can't even necessarily trust that your clients were, there's integrity to your portfolio. It's that's a fairly persuasive issue from of course the defense shouldn't be paying on a claim that's not real, right? But the reality is this is both a relationship business process and a investment process that plaintiff firms just simply must accept as part of the job. If you're going to do mass tort sexual abuse work, you have to be vetting your claims. And again, the balance is there's so many clients where I'm blown away by the fact that they're even speaking to a lawyer, right? Because I know that they're credible even before they've gone to a therapist, because they're telling me a story that I know matches 10 other survivor stories from completely different years at a facility, right? So, we have to do the work and do it in a way that protects our survivors from feeling like we don't believe them, right? When we're following up and asking for proof and asking for more questions. But that's totally doable. There's vendors that do this internal verification work, but again, that's money that those are costs that plaintiff firms have to expend on the front end, which I think it should be the cost of doing business if you're going to be in this space. But if not, you need to be paying your attorneys, and not just, intake staff who have been in a law firm for 2 months, but attorneys.
Right.
To meaningfully reach out to clients and confirm, hey, you filled out this questionnaire, you filled out this intake form. There are, to defense attorneys' credits, there are Reddit posts of people teaching people how to submit false claims of like, this is the kind of language that we're seeing in lawsuits. So just parrot this. And, of course, the good law firms are providing that. We know what those scripts look like, and we have vetting processes to make sure this is a real person. But, bad people exist everywhere. Sexual abuse is a very lucrative industry, both on the attorneys who take advantage of the process and individuals who are in bad financial circumstances who think that they can get away with taking advantage of the process. And it's simply plaintiff attorney's duty to do everything in our power to make sure that we are I think there's some amount of fraudulent activity that there probably is not preventable, right? You could have a person who I guess I won't speculate, but like there's most certainly a duty on the plaintiff firms to, whether you're investing through your attorney time or investing through hiring a vendor, to make sure that there is credibility and integrity in your portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on that same note, what do you wish that more attorneys understood about why lead validation isn't just an ROI issue,
Mhm.
but an integrity issue?
Yeah, I mean, I would say from Well, I'll first say from, just to confirm from the ROI perspective, right? Like if you work with a bad pipeline and you get 30 more cases, but one of them is fraudulent, which is probably me being very gracious of what that ratio would look like, especially in the world of AI where bots are literally creating fake intakes. That one fraudulent case is going to do so much more damage to your portfolio than those
Right.
29 good ones. But, look, like this is corny, but I say all the time that when Obama became president, people thought racism ended. And when Me Too happened, people decided that sexual abuse laws protect women. We are absolutely still at the tip of the iceberg of this fight. And the things that we are doing right now are directly influencing what this landscape will look like 5 to 10 years from now. And we've currently done, lawyers nationwide have done a high quality enough job of handling these cases that we have been able to, I think, strike the right balance of providing information to defendants so they can do their job to assess the value of the cases and the credibility of the cases. And if we don't continue to do so, if we don't continue to appropriately vet our cases, we could be in a world 10 years from now where I'm having to have conversations with every client in a mass tort portfolio of, you're going to have to come in and potentially fly back to the state that you lived in, do a whole medical examination.
Right.
We don't know where the guardrails will end up. And it's our job to make sure that we're preserving a status quo that we've worked so hard to achieve here.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. Symone, thank you so much. This conversation has gone so far beyond just the mechanics of litigation, and it's about dignity and credibility and building a firm rooted in integrity. If somebody wants to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
My website is SymoneShintonLaw.com. And I'm, of course, also on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I can't wait when I will have the YouTube link to share with everyone. So everyone send me good vibes for that work stream.
Absolutely. And we will put all of your information in the description of your podcast as well. And thank you so, so much for your time and for the incredible work that you're doing to represent survivors of sexual abuse in a legal and human capacity.
Thank you so much for making time to talk about it. It's my favorite thing in the world.
I can tell it's refreshing to speak with someone with so much passion. Thank you everyone for listening. This has been the Docket Index, and we'll see you next time.